Welcome to the monitoringresources.org 2021-22 orientations. We're going to put on a series of these webinars the first Thursday of the next couple months, so December and January. Are we skipping January, Sam? I can't remember.
No, we're doing
in January. It'll be the same webinar every time. It's about 35 to 40 minutes of us presenting to you guys, and then we'll have a good amount of time at the end for any questions. And anything that comes up, we're happy to talk to you guys about, and also we're happy to set up one-on-one time if you have specific questions for your projects. Meg usually is here. She's the face here with this kitten, but she is having some computer issues today, so she's not going to join us. But she also helps with monitoringresources.org. And I am Becca Scully. I'm the project leader, and I'm going to talk a little bit about monitoringresources.org and how it fits with our other regional tools. And then Sam Cimino is going to talk specifically about the tool and different ways that you can get started with it. And then a quick little update on some of the new stuff. So with that, next slide, please, Sam. Starting with a little background, Sam and I work for PNAMP, the Pacific Northwest Aquatic Monitoring Partnership, and the USGS. PNAMP's mission is to facilitate collaboration and coordination around aquatic monitoring in the Pacific Northwest. We do a lot of different things. We do facilitate working groups. We have webinars. We're going to put on a workshop, hopefully in person next year. So we have a lot of different irons in the fire and doing a lot of different activities to coordinate aquatic monitoring. And one of our key activities is monitoringresources.org. Next slide, please. Monitoringresources.org is an online tool that helps people document the who, what, where, when, and how of data collection. It's the tool that helps you write down the detailed documentation of how you collected data, where you collected it, and why. So there's a lot of detail in there. And by documenting in monitoringresources.org, next slide, please, your metadata, we can support other common needs. So for example, for resource managers, we can help provide information for funding decisions. For researchers and data managers, we can help provide detailed metadata to help them aggregate data across different sources. For example, we're working on a project right now to bring together in-stream tributary habitat monitoring data, and we're using monitoringresources.org to document the detailed information about how the data is collected, which we know is really important to then how the data is analyzed. For regional data repositories, it can improve data access and discovery. So we can have a centralized location for documenting this who, what, where, when, and how, and then people can come there and search and then go to the specific repository that holds the data. We're not a data repository, we're a metadata repository. And it can help with regional reporting. We can compile data at watershed scales. People have used this documentation in their ISRP reviews to help sort of report the work they've done. People have used it in their the documentation in their BPA annual reports to help then, explain the work that they have done. So by documenting here one time, you can use it multiple different places, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. Next slide, please. So why monitoringresources.org as a documentation tool? Monitoringresources.org has been around for about 14 years now. It started as monitoring methods, and then we've evolved and grown and tried to simplify. Over the last 5 years, we've really focused on simplifying and streamlining the data entry into the tool. It's a very structured online tool set. It guides you through the process of documenting the same metadata for each of your projects and each of the sets of work you do. So it provides project design documentation, metadata documentation, and supports project collaboration. It can be used to document any sort of monitoring action, but in general, it's populated with aquatic monitoring because in general, Sam and I work with people who do aquatic monitoring. But if you had other monitoring and you saw value in documenting that in this tool, the process can be applied to that. Next slide, please. So by documenting metadata in monitoringresources.org, we promote the FAIR principles, which are, making metadata and data findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And these are a set of principles that were agreed upon by an international working group for data access and moving into the future of reusing and integrating data from multiple sources. These practices allow us to enter information once and easily reuse it through multiple systems, and then it allows the output of monitoringresources.org to be ingested and used by other systems through software and different technical solutions. So by documenting in one place, we're making your data and metadata more findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. Next slide, please. So some examples for that. We're really trying to focus and collaborate with our regional partners to do this. So if you are a BPA project sponsor, for example, would enter information once in one of these systems, and then we behind the scenes can figure out ways to exchange this information. So in this example, thinking about project sponsors, CB Fish is the holder of proposals, contracts, and statement of works, an annual report. So that's a project management system. It helps you understand, the documentation of the project itself. And then monitoring resources is the documentation of your study plans, sample designs, protocols, and methods. So that's the monitoring metadata, the process you apply to collect or analyze monitoring data. StreamNet is the entity and the holder of data sets and high-level indicators. They hold things like the trend data, the CX data, and the archive data. So they hold the data itself. Again, we're just focused on metadata. StreamNet will hold the data. And then the Columbia Basin Fish and Wildlife Library holds things like literature and gray reports and books and that kind of thing. So everybody has a different role in the system. And if we can work to link these things together, hopefully we can decrease the amount of work that you guys are asked to do. Next slide, please. So this is sort of a rehash of the last slide. Monitoringresources.org is currently linked to CB Fish. If you're a person who uses CB Fish, you will have an RMNE work element, you will have had to interact with monitoringresources.org, and we'll talk a little more detail about that in a second. We are working to connect the monitoringresources.org documentation to StreamNet. There's some loose connections there, but we're really focused this year on QA/QCing those connections, making sure that we're asking people who are submitting their data to StreamNet for the right level of information, and then building behind the scenes tools and access points so that we can link these systems together automatically, or automatically, some people say, so that we then don't have to document metadata twice, and we can have really robust metadata that you've already entered because you had a contract with Bonneville reused in a new way. And then there's connections between CB Fish and StreamNet and the Columbia Basin Fish and Wildlife Library. Monitoringresources.org is not as connected to the Columbia Basin Fish and Wildlife Library, but it is part of the same ecosystem, and sometimes you will see it pop up in that sort of world. So I'm going to talk a little bit more details about some of these connections. Next slide, please. So the first one I want to touch on is this connection between the BPA contracting process and monitoringresources.org. So for people and folks who have RMNE work elements 156, 157, and 162, it's required that metadata is documented in monitoringresources.org. And by metadata, we need protocols, methods, study plans, and sample designs. So then when you're in your contract, this is well, you can't see, but I'm circling. This is an image of what you would see in your work element in your BPA contract. You would then select the study plan and the associated sample design, and that would pull in all of the information in your protocols and methods applied. So monitoringresources.org houses that metadata, and then you reuse it in CB Fish. Next slide, please. So a little more detail about these connections, and I know they can be confusing, and later Sam will talk a little bit about some of the documentation we have that can help you understand these connections a little bit better. But this is sort of a map for those specific RMNE work elements that require documentation in monitoringresources.org. For work elements 157, those are data collection work elements. And for that, you need a study plan, a protocol with the listed collection methods, and then a sample design that details where you plan on collecting that information. If you have a work element 162, that's a data analysis work element. So you're doing some sort of calculations or analysis on the data you collected, or some other data you found somebody else collected, and you're in charge of sort of producing results from. And for 162s, you're required to link that to a study plan, which also has a protocol in it, and that would have analysis methods. So how you calculated your results, and then to a sample design that included an area of inference, and that is the extent of the area that your analysis covers. So maybe it's just you do some analysis and it's the point, but maybe you're doing analysis and it is making sort of a statement about the health of the watershed or the stream or the population. So sort of at that level. And then for a lot of people, you have work element 157 and 162. So you collect the data and you do the analysis. And in that case, you can link those two work elements to the same study plan. In the protocol, it would include both collection methods and analysis methods. And then the sample design would include sample locations and area of inference. So that's a pretty common case for folks because they are collecting data and then producing some sort of metric or indicator from the data they collect. So moving forward, we know this can be a little confusing. So we have some documentation that will help you with that. And then, like I was talking about a little bit earlier, you can move forward, Sam. Thank you. We are working to connect monitoringresources.org to the StreamNet data. So a lot of folks enter or submit their data and information to StreamNet as either part of the coordinated assessments project or the trend data or other sort of data store actions. And with some of that data, there are project numbers. So your BPA project number is associated with that data set. And through that project number, we can then link it back to monitoringresources.org via that project ID. And then whatever metadata is in monitoringresources.org associated with that project can then be linked to your data. So we're working through a couple of examples with StreamNet to understand if we're linking at the correct level to describe the data and to make sure that we are pulling the right information together. So QA/QCing some of this, so then we can look at it at a larger scale and figure out the easiest way with a minimal amount of work to connect the data in the StreamNet data repository to the information in monitoringresources.org. And Nancy Leonard is the StreamNet project manager, so we can answer some questions on that, but Nancy would be the person that would know the most. Next slide, please. And then, like I said, we do work a little bit with the Columbia Basin Fish and Wildlife Library. That they serve as the repository for fish and wildlife research conducted in the Columbia River Basin. It's the library for the Northwest Power Conservation Council. Projects are encouraged to submit their reports and research projects or products to this library. It is also resources for projects submitting proposals. So you can, put information or reports, white papers, journal articles in the Columbia Basin Fish and Wildlife Library, and then they can be accessed through multiple points. And the way that monitoringresources.org has sort of interacted with products in the Columbia Basin Fish and Wildlife Library, next slide, please, is through the use of links to the monitoringresources.org documentation in things like annual reports and papers. So instead of rewriting your methods and protocols, and sample designs and study plans in your annual report, you can put hyperlinks to that documentation in monitoringresources.org, and then everyone knows the process you undertook to collect and analyze that data. Additionally, there have been some published papers where people have done the same thing. I am not a writer, but I'm told that when you are publishing papers, they can't be too long, which is issue with when I try to write. So by instead of including the full documentation of extensive field methods and analysis procedures, the folks that wrote this long-term fish monitoring in large rivers paper included links to the documentation in monitoringresources.org, then giving themselves more space in their paper to write interesting things about results and lessons learned instead of methods. So those are some of the things that we are working on. We are really, really focused on trying to connect StreamNet to monitoringresources.org and to try and improve those connections and make it so that the information and the hard work you do is reused multiple times and can be seen by many different people in different formats. So that's our focus this year, and that's sort of the background on monitoringresources.org. I'm going to turn it over to Sam, and he is going to give you guys some updates, just some guidance on how to get started with monitoringresources.org, and then a little update on what we're working on in the future.
Yeah, thanks, Becca. So now that we have a better understanding of the roles and the connectedness of CB Fish, StreamNet, the Columbia Basin Fish and Wildlife Library, and monitoring resources, we should dive into navigating and utilizing monitoringresources.org. So here we have a diagram of the components in monitoring resources and how they are related. You're going to see this diagram often in monitoring resources training materials. And you'll also see this simplified version of it at the top of many monitoring resources pages. It's kind of our roadmap. What's important to get out of this diagram, along with the stuff you can find in each of the component types, is the relationships. For instance, there can be many sample designs attached to one or many study plans. Conversely, a study plan is linked to only one protocol. This all may seem like a lot right now, and it kind of is, but that's why we have a whole section in monitoring resources devoted to learning the tool and assisting the users. So we highly recommend the Learn area, even if you are an experienced user. The FAQs page is a great resource, and it links to our guidance document. The guidance document is a little big and overwhelming, so we've also created these modules specific to certain documentation types that are much easier to read and follow. All of these guidance materials can also be found at pnamp.org. But instead of going straight to this guidance document, I really suggest you go to the modules on creating methods or creating protocols, or seeing how monitoringresources.org and BPA contracting relate to each other. And all of these modules can also be found in our FAQs page. So back in the Learn section of monitoring resources, we also have a glossary, and the glossary can be very useful because some of monitoring resources terms might not align perfectly with how you have defined them in the past. For instance, our definitions of protocols and methods may differ a little bit from yours. Methods in monitoring resources are the step-by-step procedures that aim to measure metrics and indicators, whereas protocols are a collection of those methods that address a monitoring objective or multiple objectives. The Learn section also contains a number of quick training videos, which are typically less than 5 minutes in length. And these are continuously being updated to best reflect monitoringresources.org. Some of the really useful training videos are the method customization video, or how you are to map your metrics and indicators to methods. And so once you get familiarized with the Learn section and maybe have answered a few of your first questions, it's really time to get into documenting your content. And so again, we see this diagram to see how the components are related. And it's worth mentioning here, in the first or early years of documenting your content and monitoring resources, there is a considerable amount of effort involved. However, after that first documentation, you'll mostly just be updating your material. So doing it thoroughly the first time will save you a lot of time and energy in the long run. So now we're back at the home page. There are various ways to get started, but really the first thing to do is to make sure you're logged in. When you're logged in, you'll notice at the top of the screen, it'll say welcome and then your login name. When you click on your login name, you'll get a list of collaborators and reviewers. You might have to scroll down a little bit, but you'll get this list of colleagues, which are collaborators and reviewers. To add collaborators or reviewers, you can click on the Add a Colleague button, and you will then get the option to add your colleague as a collaborator or a reviewer. Collaborators can view and edit each other's draft components. So it's a good idea. This is someone you know well, maybe probably someone you work with. But they can see all of your draft material and they can edit it. Reviewers can see all of your draft content, but they cannot edit it. So this might be a good idea to maybe add your COTR as a reviewer if you're familiar with them and you know that they're using monitoring resources to kind of keep an eye on your project. Also, when you're logged in, you'll have a tab at the top of the page called Portfolio. The portfolio has a drop-down menu allowing you to view all of your stuff that you own, broken down by content type. So if I were to click on my study plans from the portfolio drop-down, I'd get a list of all the study plans that I own and the useful information related to them. So I can see the title, I can see whether it's finalized or draft. Obviously, I'm the owner of all of them. And then I can see what protocol is attached to that study plan and what sample designs or how many sample designs are attached to it and so on. Another way to get started, and particularly if you are creating new content or searching for content you don't own, is from the home page and selecting document. So when you select document, you'll navigate to these 3 documentation types. Clicking any of these will take you to what we refer to as a library or a list of all the documented content of that type. So if I were to have clicked on methods from that previous screen, we would navigate to the method library or the list of methods. And here you can see, or here in the methods library, you can search for methods. And you can search for methods using keywords, or you can filter your search by pull down items like the state, which would be only searching for finalized methods is a good idea. You can search by owner if you know a specific owner to search for who owns that a method you're looking for, or you could search by type. And this would be like distinguishing what type of method you are looking for. There are really 2 types of methods in monitoring resources: data collection methods and data analysis methods. One other thing I'll point out here is this ID. All methods have unique IDs, and it can be really useful if you know the ID number to kind of skip all this other stuff and just type in the ID number, because then you'll find your method the quickest way. If you think you found a method that might fit your needs, you can view it without opening it in a new web page just by clicking on that far left caret. So you don't have to open a new web page, just click on the caret next to the method and it'll expand to reveal some really valuable information like the metrics and indicators associated with that method, the method's purpose, the number of protocols using this method, and a citation for the method. So it gives you this kind of nice background about the method before you commit to it by opening it on a new web page. And this information will also give you a better idea if this method can be added to one of your protocols as it is in its current state, or if it's similar enough to add to a protocol and then customize it to better represent your step-by-step procedures or the materials you use. And I'll get into how to customize a method in just a second here, but customizing a method really does save you a lot of time. And if you can't find a method that fits what you do close enough to customize, you can always create a new method. And so at the top of these lists of methods or list of protocols or list of any of these documentation type pages, there is a create button. But now I'm going to switch over to our live demonstration on how to customize a method. And like I said, customizing a method will save you a lot of time because then you don't have to go through that typical review process. So anytime you create a new method, you have to go through a review process. But customizing a method, you can just add it to your protocol and go from there. So first thing we do from the home page, once again, make sure that we're logged in and go to one of your protocols from your portfolio. So I click on portfolio, go down to my protocols. I get a list of the protocols, and then I just choose one of the protocols to open. Click snorkel surveys. So first thing you'll notice is it opens up to this protocol details page, which is useful. You can kind of see all the details of this protocol that I've already added to it. But we want to edit this protocol because we want to add a method to it. So we click on this edit protocol button. And then we want to go to this method section. So the first section is the basics and objectives, but we want to go to methods because we're adding a method. And we're going to get this list of the methods I've already added to this protocol. And they're separated by data collection methods and data analysis methods. To add a new method, we want to click on this Add Methods button, and we'll get this pop-up. And it'll load. And sometimes when I share my screen, the pop-up jumps around a little bit. So first thing to notice when the pop-up comes up is you get these two options, suggested methods, and you're only going to get suggested methods if you've already added metrics and indicators to your protocol. So if you're just starting a new protocol, you're probably not going to have anything here because you won't have any metrics or indicators. But since I've added some metrics and indicators and attached them to some of my other methods, monitoring resources suggests other methods that might be useful for this protocol, which is nice. But I'll show you the other way to search for methods to add to your protocol. You just click on this little entire method library radio button, and it switches over. And then you can search for methods by keyword. And again, you can also search here by the ID number. And the ID number, if you know it, is a much faster way to find things. Because if I search for something like fish in here, it's going to pull up every single method that mentions fish. So, but I will search for, I'm going to type something in here. I just got to think about what I'm going to type. I need a fish identification method. So I'll type in identification because it'll be a little bit less, or hopefully it'll show a few less methods than if I typed in fish. Click search. It's going to think for a little while about all the methods that have identification in them. And then I can search for a fish identification method. So here we are. I have a fish identification and data method here. I can highlight this method and get better details on it. So it's a fish identification data entry in the large river system. That sounds right. I can also see some of the step-by-step instructions for conducting the method, which is really useful before I want to add it to my protocol. And say this one looks great. All I have to do then would be, if this was working, maybe I've already added that method, so no big deal. Yeah, it looks like I've already added that method to this protocol. So I'll add a different method. I'll add this floodplain random point sampling method. Again, this looks pretty good. And I just click on the arrow to add it over to my protocol. And then I go down here and I click save. So now we go back into here and we see, oh, okay, great. The floodplain random point sampling method has been added to my protocol. So now I have this new method that has been finalized in my protocol, but say maybe it doesn't perfectly fit what I do in my protocol. So what I can do is customize that method. So I have this little pencil and paper icon here, and I just click on it, and this will allow me to customize the method. So this is the original method's purpose, and if I want to change something about this purpose, I can just click on this little box here and explain my customization. And it only customizes the method for this specific protocol. It doesn't customize the method anywhere else. It's only specific to this protocol. And the same thing, I can customize the stepwise procedure, or I can customize the equipment list. So let's say, in this equipment list, they use dip nets. That's great. Instead of dip nets, I use something like a D-frame. And then I just click save. And their dip nets might be D-frame nets, but I'm just clarifying here that my method is a little bit different. And so now you'll see here that this method that I added now says modified floodplain random point sampling locations. And it's only modified in this protocol again. And when I click on this modified method, you'll see that underneath my equipment list, I have this modification. So it's as simple as that. And you don't have to go through a review process. So you save a ton of time by customizing methods that are similar to what you do rather than creating a new method. And so that's basically it with customization. There, to finalize protocol, there are certain requirements, and we can get into that in the questions, but the one other thing I'd need to do after you add a method, you have to map metrics and indicators to those methods, and we can show you that, but there's also a video on that as well. So the other thing I want to show you, and I'll go back to our presentation. Ooh, this one is our discovery. So the other general function of monitoring resources is to discover other monitoring events and locations. And so clicking on the discovery button on the home page will navigate you to the Monitoring Explorer tool. So I'll go back to our live demo. So from monitoring resources, I just have to go home and then click on this Discover tool. What would happen is I get a map of our Monitoring Explorer tool. So these are all the sampling sites we have documented in Monitoring Explorer. And then we have this filter up top. So you click on this little plus sign to open up the filter. You can filter all these data collection events or sampling sites by a specific protocol or by a method, or where the data event takes place, or when it takes place. Then you can also filter by a program type or an organization. And so I'm going to filter by this BPA's Action Effectiveness Monitoring Program. Click on that, hit apply. It might take a second because I'm sharing a whole bunch of things right now, but eventually these numbers will decrease. Give it another second. There we go. Okay, so we have quite a few sampling events still going on. What I'm going to do is zoom in just a little bit, and it breaks them down. You can see these popping up. And I'm also going to add some layers here. So we have a whole bunch of different layers. I'm going to add a Coho ESU layer. So there it pops up a Coho ESU layer. Okay, I'm looking for a BPA AEM data collection event within this Coho ESU layer. Okay, great. There's at least 2 that I see here. If I click on those, I see these 2 data collection events, and I'm going to remove this layer just so we can kind of see it a little bit better. And when you click on a data collection event, what you get is this data collection event information. And so within the data collection event information, what you would see here, oops, sorry, keep zooming out, is you get a whole bunch of details about that data collection event, including latitude and longitude, the date that the data collection event took place. And then you also have links to the protocol and the study plan. And if I wasn't sharing my screen, I'd be able to zoom out a little bit, and you would see that it's also linked to the organization that does the data collection event, and you have these direct links. So if I clicked on this protocol, it would take me to monitoring resources and show me that protocol documentation. The last thing I want to show you with the map, and I'll zoom out here so we can kind of see all the points again, is this data export options. So you'll see here that with my filter, there are still 468 events. That's quite a few events, but maybe you want to download all of these events. And so we have this little plus button over here. If I click on that, and this is tiny, it's going to be very tough to read. But what you can see, it lists all of the events and the information that you would find by clicking on each event. So it would show you the protocol, the study plan, and the program. And the best thing about this is you can export this as a shapefile or a CSV file. So it might have helped if I filtered a little bit more so that I wouldn't have 468 events, but maybe that's all you want, or maybe that is exactly what you want. And you can download all this information. So I'm going to head back to my slides. And of course, I can answer some questions because I know I'm kind of burning through all of this. But we can answer some questions at the end. The last thing I want to show you, and this is pretty brand new, and we actually haven't even come to a name for it yet, but I'm going to call it the study plan summary. And it's another explanatory tool in monitoringresources.org. And the study plan summary, or the one-stop shop as it says right now, summarizes all of the components that I've already discussed for a single study plan into one simple overview. So you would get this in your study plan summary. You would be able to open up this protocol, and you wouldn't have to leave the page. Just click on the arrow and you get information about that protocol, which is really useful. And then you can also get information about the data collection events, and you get a map of your data collection events, which is great because then you don't even need to navigate away from the study plan summary to go to your sample design or to Monitoring Explorer to see those data collection events. They're all right here, and they're all associated with your study plan summary or study plan one-stop shop. The study plan summary will be available soon, and we'll be sure to let you all know when it's up and running at full capacity. There'll probably be a video to go along with it in our learn section. We'll ping everyone or send out an announcement when that is fully up and running. But it is a really useful tool. It's really nice. It's kind of like one giant department store where you can get your groceries, you can get your clothes, you can get all your shopping needs in one spot and don't have to leave the store and go somewhere else. So a few key reminders to wrap up today. You must be logged in to do any sort of editing in monitoringresources.org. cbfish.org and monitoringresources.org logins are not necessarily the same. Just keep that in mind. If you have a question, first check the FAQ page, the glossary, and the modules or training videos. That's a great place to start. But again, you can also just come straight to me or Meg or Becca. We're always available if you just send us an email. Only owners and colleagues or collaborators can edit and draft content or customize finalized methods. So if you have a collaborator, they can finalize your methods for you. So that's something important to keep in mind. Components must be finalized to add them to your content. So I was talking about, or I showed you how to add methods to a protocol. Those methods that I added or that I looked at in the protocol through the protocol list are only finalized methods because you can't add draft methods to a protocol. You can make new versions of methods or clone finalized content. So say you've been doing some sort of data collection method for a while, and over the years it's changed a little bit. Instead of creating an entirely new method, you can just version it and update it, which will save you a ton of time. And then red asterisk fields, these indicate required fields. For instance, within a protocol, their required fields are background and objective. You must have at least one method and one metric and indicator. You must map these metrics and indicators together. You'll also need to add a citation, stuff like that. So the next steps, reach out to us to request one-to-one guidance. We will do some pre-work and review your content and review your current project. We'll also set up individual work sessions over WebShare. So feel free to ask us any questions concerning your documentation or discovery needs. And then we also have these little articles in our monthly newsletter that are, sometimes it's good examples of a documented method in monitoring resources, or it's an announcement about monitoring resources. So you might think about signing up for the PNAP monthly newsletter. We don't give you a whole bunch of other, I don't know, garbage in your inbox. It's mostly just the newsletter. And then last thing is our contact information. So the best way to contact us is at this gs-monitoring resources at usgs.gov. But you could also just email us directly if you have an urgent question. And then there are links to our FAQ page, our glossary, our training video, the guidance document. And then this slide presentation will be available. And this link might change a little bit. It probably won't actually, but this presentation will be available at pnamp.org. And last thing, resources for Bonneville Power Administration project sponsors. You're going to want to email RM&E support at bpa.gov. And now we can take questions. So if you have questions, you can unmute yourself. The mute is going to be that little microphone, and it probably has a little slash through it. So you can just unmute yourself if you have any questions, or you can type them into the chat, and the chat is that little word bubble.
Yeah, Sam, thanks. Like Sam said, if you're working on this, we are here to help you. So please don't hesitate to reach out. We do our best to get back as soon as possible to folks that are struggling or working through this process. Yeah, if you have anyone has any questions about anything, feel free.
Hey, Sam and Rebecca, this is Denise.
Hey.
Hi, Denise.
Hey, is that customization thing new? Because if it isn't, I haven't been paying attention very well.
It's not too new.
Okay.
But maybe it just hasn't been like in the forefront for a while. And we're really trying to push people to customize just because it saves so much time. It doesn't go through that review process. So if you're familiar with monitoring resources, when you create a new method, when you're done with your creation, you submit it for finalization.
Right.
And then usually me or Meg will then review that method. And maybe it's great and we'll just finalize it right there. But a lot of times we'll ask for a little more information, or could you clarify on something? The review isn't for scientific integrity. It's really more for completeness and clarity. But when you customize a method, you don't have to go through this review process. You're using someone else's already finalized method, which we thought was clear and complete already, and you're just adding little details to it. And there is a training video on customizing the method, and it's probably less than 5 minutes. It's pretty easy to follow, I think. So definitely check that out if you need a refresher, because it is, it's maybe not the most obvious thing to do, but yeah.
So when I heard that, my first thought was, because you could customize it, like half the content is changed. And if nobody's reviewing that, I could see it getting really messy and unclear quickly. Is there any trigger, like someone writes, 1,000 words and it triggers you to go, this is really a new method, not a customized method?
Well, we get little emails whenever anyone customizes method, so then I can check it out. Most people, sometimes customizing a method, if you're going to be changing it a ton, sometimes it is easier to just create a new method. And so we haven't come across yet a method that someone has just, basically created an entirely new method within their customization. But I guess that could certainly happen. But we do have a way of checking on it. And if that was the case, I could probably just reach out to them and be like, hey, it might be easier to create a new method here. But
yeah, and the method can only be customized within a protocol. So when they submit the protocol for review, because you have to submit the protocol for review, Sam and Meg also glance at those methods, and I'm sure they'd be like, this one is funny. Also, in general, people really want to document what they did correctly. We've seen that. Like, people aren't always super excited about doing documentation, but when they do it, they want it to be correct. So they're sort of self-motivated to be like, well, we should put in our own because this one is pretty far off from this existing method.
Right. Okay, great. I do have a second question.
Sure.
So the map that shows where monitoring is occurring, I just think that's fabulous. We've wanted it in the basin for a very long time. Is the only way to get information in there to have protocol, study designs, methods, or are people using it and just coming in and saying, hey, this is where I'm doing some work, But they don't really want to document all the metadata.
Yeah. So as of right now, to use this particular map, you need to have the metadata documentation. So you need to have the methods and the protocols, and the sample designs and study. I think it's actually just methods and protocols, and study plans are required. I don't think sample designs are required.
Okay.
And there are a couple ways to get the data into this tool. There's like a process in the tool itself where you like click buttons and then your locations appear on this map. But also we built APIs to pull information into monitoringresources.org, sort of in a standard format. And that is part of the work we're trying to push forward with StreamNet, and in connecting these data systems. If we're able to figure out how to feed the data, the metadata to StreamNet systems, we want to then figure out how to feed those locations back to this map. So then you guys can put your data there, but we can get the location data and start building out this monitoring explorer where you can, it's not holding data, but it's just holding that metadata, so we can like link back to the data systems. So we're really trying to focus on building these connections and then figuring out how to get more information into this monitoring explorer map. But it does require the documentation to be there. And if you have a BPA work element with one of those RMNE BPA work elements, you will have the documentation already. We just need to wire it to the data and then figure out how to pull the location information back into this map.
Okay. Yeah, so you partially answered the next question, which is BPA requires you to put a Latin long in of where you're doing your work. And so you're saying you're pulling that in. So, but what BPA does, and I don't know how many people, I think very few, because I've seen some of the documentation in BPA on where you're doing the work. They have planned, unless they've changed the field name, and then updated or actual work. So here's where you planned it, but this is where you actually did the work. You're supposed to go back in and fill that in. Do you have both of those in this?
So that is a very good question. We have the capacity to have planned versus actual. We currently mostly hold planned. And planned we don't show on this map, but it is part of our development work plan to figure out how to use this to show planned maps, so or the planned collection. So you could then say, like, in 2022, where's all the planned data collection in the basin? So we have the capacity to hold actuals, but we don't have a lot of people reporting actuals back to monitoringresources.org. Yeah. And for those work elements, I am not sure what BPA's plan is and next steps for asking people to report actuals to monitoringresources.org. If they do, we will need to do some work to improve that and build guidance and have a couple more of these webinars specifically focused on that. So yeah, it's kind of, I don't have a great answer.
Now, it makes sense. And like I said, from what I've worked on in BPA projects, there isn't a lot of folks reporting that actual versus planned, unfortunately. So,
yeah.
All right. Well, thank you.
Yeah, for sure, Denise. And we'd love to figure that out, because then this map will become more useful, because we'll have all these, all these like great data points. So we're working on it. It just, like everything, it takes a little bit. And technology has come a long way since 14 years ago when this tool was started. People now know what like APIs are, and we can figure out how like systems talk to systems. So I think we're getting closer every year.
Right. Yeah, it's looking great.
Thanks, Denise.
Yeah, thanks, Denise. Any other questions? We have like 4 or 5 more minutes. And if you think of a question later, you can always just email us or something like that too. All right. I think we're good to go then. Thanks for joining us, for sure. If any of your colleagues couldn't make it, again, we'll have this recording on YouTube but we'll also be doing this presentation at the beginning, the first Thursday of the next 2 months. So the first Thursday of December and the first Thursday of January. It'll be basically the exact same presentation. So you might not have to come back, but if your colleagues want to sit in, that would be amazing.
Awesome. Great. Thank you, everyone.